Well, folks, don't sue me, bro, but this dark trick might prevent the 2020 recession, and you should know about it. And that's why on today's Meet Kevin Report, I'm going to break down what this dark trick is, how it relates to what's going on in the market today, and what you should do about it to make sure that you can take advantage of the benefits of this trick happening. And that is because this is news that makes you money. Quick note, 22% off the real estate investing course, real estate agent course, and the 10X Vegas crash course does end in 2 days. It's September 10th. Make sure to get in using 10X 2020. So we've all heard it before. The economy is slowing down. There seem to be cracks coming through the foundation. Yet for some reason, since Donald Trump took office, the Dow Jones is up 43%, and many parts of the economy keep booming. In fact, consumer confidence continues to remain at an all-time high. Obviously, drama with China, Brexit, and incredibly low interest rates have led us to all kind of feel a little bit confused as to what's going on. But there's a second thing that relates to a dirty trick the government might use to sort of play with the recession. We've all heard of the national debt before. In fact, I remember as a child growing up and in school, the teachers would always bring up, look at our national debt clock. It just keeps going up and keeps going up. And that's kind of been pretty consistent over the last, 30 years. We also know how bad debt is and how it might be unfair to sort of saddle our children and future generations with more debt. In previous videos, I've talked about what I call the Trump recession, where basically Trump can sort of negotiate hardcore right now with more than a year to go before his election. That might sort of upset markets, might increase the odds. The Federal Reserve reduces interest rates, which plays into what Trump wants anyway, while Trump is negotiating hardcore with China. And then guess what might happen next year? China might end up striking a deal with Trump, as maybe, who knows, Trump softens his tone a little bit conveniently before the election, and boom, a deal is struck, and all of a sudden, not only are China trade fears gone, but interest rates are lower. That's what I'm sort of calling the Trump recession. That's kind of Trump's play on the recession to get reelected, that is. But there's something even trickier that could be happening. See, what generally happens when a recession gets started? Well, let's look back to the last recession, when George W. Bush issued checks, straight up checks, to consumers to hopefully get them to spend more money. That increases the government debt. Well, what did Obama do? Stimulus, cash for clunkers, bailouts. What does that do? It increases the national debt as the government tries to stimulate the economy. Well, what is something that Donald Trump could do? What is that dark trick that Donald Trump could do right now as debts are at all-time highs? He could take advantage of what's currently being looked at as one of the weirdest economic transformations ever. Think about this for a moment. When we buy a lot of one thing, the price of that one thing usually goes up. That's supply and demand. Well, as a government borrows more money, interest rates usually go up in the same way supply and demand works. Yet something really weird is happening in our economy right now. Our government keeps borrowing more and more and more money, yet interest rates are falling. It's breaking a very commonly held economic theory of supply and demand. In other words, the more money the United States borrows to spend on the country or for government jobs, the cheaper the interest rate actually becomes. At least that's the current trend. So what does that mean for Donald Trump? Well, now combine the Trump recession, that is Donald Trump's play with China leading up to the next election, but combine that with the idea that, wow, with a Republican-controlled Senate and possibly some easy concessions to Democrats as the economy continues to be on uneven footing, what could Donald Trump possibly do? More stimulus, more debt. Maybe less taxes, more debt. Why not? Because right now, as interest rates continue to fall towards negative territories, why not borrow more. Now, before I talk about the problems with this, because hold on, there's some big problems with borrowing more, and there's some important things for you to know about in terms of how you need to strategize to prevent yourself from getting hurt by more debt, that is more government debt. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's talk about how this relates to the current marketplace. We've heard of these negative interest rates in Europe before. In case you're not familiar with that, basically, people in Europe who want to put their money into savings accounts to make sure their money is safe have to pay the bank money to keep their money safe. You know how here in America, you could take $1,000 and put it into Wealthfront and get paid 2.32% guaranteed on your money? Yeah, there it's the other way around. You put $1,000 into Wealthfront, a year later you have less money. And on one hand, you might be thinking, why would anybody do that? That sounds crazy. Well, pension funds have to do it because they need their money safe and available to pay it out, at least money that they're not investing for the longer term. But how does that relate to the United States? Well, we might be next to experience consistently lowering interest rates, which again plays into the theory that Donald Trump could want to, with the cooperation of Congress, generate and balloon the United States government debt even more. Now, why do I think interest rates are going to trend downward? Well, because Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell was just in Zurich giving a speech to some kind of economic panel, and guess what? As expected, Jerome Powell doubles down on the idea that the Federal Reserve will do anything in their power to prevent a recession. They are ready to drop interest rates even further if indicators suggest that they need to in an effort to stimulate the economy and sustain the expansion. But beyond that, Jerome Powell also suggests there's no indication of a recession coming anytime soon. Part of the reason I believe that is because they've got plenty of tools left on their tool belt to prevent the recession, at least for the next few years. This is why I think the whole 2020 recession argument is a bunch of baloney. Hang tight for just a moment and I'll tell you a little bit more about my strategy and when I think the recession will actually come. See, usually when I talk about lower interest rates and more borrowing, there's always this sort of undercurrent of people going, oh, we're gonna be the next Venezuela, we're gonna have hyperinflation. But let's look at Venezuela for a second. Their current constitution is just barely 20 years old. President Maduro's social programs have been an utter failure. And as a country dependent on oil, as oil prices continue not only to be volatile, but have fallen dramatically from their peak in, for example, 2009 and 2010, what do you expect? It's not a country that you could expect to be consistent. On the other hand, the United States is over 200 years old and has the most trusted currency in the entire world. Therefore, in my opinion, a bet against the United States dollar, a bet against the United States, the idea that there's gonna be hyperinflation and the dollar is gonna be worthless because the dollar isn't backed by anything. A bet against the United States is, in my opinion, a bet against the world. Which I'm not saying the end of the world isn't possible, I just think the odds are the end of the world isn't going to come just yet. Maybe I just secretly don't want the end of the world to come yet. I really like making money off investing in real estate, which is exactly what I teach all of you how to do, no matter how much experience you have. That's what the courses are for, in case you're wondering. And besides, guess what more inflation actually does for the United States economy? It makes the United States debt easier to pay off. The best thing that could probably happen right now is a little bit more inflation for people who have a debt, for people who own real estate, or people who owe money like the government. See, inflation makes it easier to pay off debt. But what about jobs? Well, interestingly, and this again relates back to potentially Donald Trump's evil trick, jobs continue to grow and wage growth is also growing. Now, yes, the pace of job growth, how many jobs we're adding, has slowed. We gained 130,000 jobs instead of 150,000 jobs as expected. However, 36,000 of those jobs came from government sector jobs, which doesn't that already relate back to what we're saying about the government possibly spending more money? Government spends more money, debt goes up, but it's okay because what does it do? Stimulate the economy even as the debt continues to balloon, but interest rates continue to fall, making that debt less expensive. And if inflation happens, all is good. It makes it easier to pay back the debt in a different time. Obviously, there are always the perma-bears, and they like pointing to data. Well, look how bad manufacturing is doing. Well, look how bad retail is doing. Well, no duh. Am I really surprised that retail jobs fell by 11,100 positions? No. Look at online is killing retail. I mean, this makes sense to me. Does it make sense that manufacturing is in a recession because of a trade war? Yes, it does. These things make sense to me. Speculative borrowing like we saw leading up to the 2008 recession and dead people getting loans did not make sense to me. And no wonder. What came out of that? The Great Recession after the housing bubble collapsed. Or I guess you would say burst. So what's the point? So what's the point to us? So what if government debt increases? What does it mean to us? What should we be doing? Well, in my opinion, the first thing I'm doing is I'm investing as if there won't be a recession for at least the next 3 to 4 years, possibly even longer. Why? Because I think the government has plenty of room to increase the national debt. That's that dirty trick. Or to lower interest rates even more, possibly even into the negative territory, to sustain our economic growth. And I am under the strong belief that under no circumstance will Donald Trump not use every tool on his belt to prevent a recession. That is, he will use everything he's got to make sure he can prevent a recession, which can easily be done by more government spending. Yes, more government debt. At the same time, what is Jerome Powell going to do? Well, their entire board will probably continue to reduce interest rates. And this might continue this slow bleed recession for easily another 3 to 4 years, possibly even longer. And realistically, in 3 to 4 years' time, what should hopefully, by God, hopefully be done? The trade war and Brexit, and hopefully we've found a footing again, and wow, all of a sudden we've completed this manufacturing shift, we've completed the shift away from retail, and what could possibly happen next? Well, there could be a recession because of all the mounting debt, or there could be another golden decade. Who knows? And that's the thing. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. But what I recommend is, well, exactly what I'm doing, and I put my money where my mouth is. Not speculating. Stay strong to the belief that if you were going to buy investments, try to buy them below market value, like buying real estate below market value. That's called buying insulative assets. Things that will do well even if the economy falls because you've done anything you could to protect yourself. Any kind of fixed rate debt that somebody else is paying off is also really good. I wouldn't go into any kind of speculative, commercial apartment building 5-year loans right now. See, I think those could get decimated in a recession. But keep this in mind, as government debt rises, consumer debt also tends to rise. And even though consumer confidence is at all-time highs right now, the more, and this is really well studied and should be obvious, the more debt consumers have, the less they end up spending. So it's possible that for another 3 or 4 years, we might see people continue to balloon their debt. And that could end up leading to a recession 3 to 4 years down the road. Now again, nobody knows. Everybody always says economists are famous for having predicted 9 out of the last 5 recessions. But to me, this is no more than a paper cut and a slow bleed sort of recession, if you will. And for now, there are plenty of bandages left in the first aid kit. Now, this isn't to say that there aren't going to be larger problems, but I'm just not seeing anything immediate. Yes, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, there could be bigger problems, but we've got plenty of time to look for those. In the meantime, I'm gonna continue to buy wedge deals. Join me in the live streams because I'm about to do a live stream next. Thanks for joining. We'll see you soon.